Sure. Okay, there. Okay, Dave.
All right. So, hello everyone. Real quick, and hopefully it will be quick. I'm going to show a couple resources here about how to spin up some red team infrastructure, and some of the thinking and methodology that you would need to think about with that. So number one, I'm gonna talk about DigitalOcean here. So DigitalOcean is a service that allows you to quickly spin up like a free, not free, but like a cheap virtual private server, and allows you to extend it. Some of the other things that you can do is you can do things like you can start deploying apps, which might be useful if you are needing to do some shared instances and things like that. And another reason why you might want to use this is things like Metasploit have like Metasploit servers and things like that allow you to have a shared pen test instance. And that can be very useful in a large scale engagement. So real quick, it didn't exactly work, but I kind of want to show sort of this thinking about spinning up some of these tools. Okay, so I'm going to go over here to my terminal. And so one of the things that's really important with this is that we don't want to get ourselves compromised. So I've gone ahead and I've created some SSH keys. A point here is when you do that, you do SSH keygen. And then if you put F, you can specify the place that you want the file to be, right? So in this case, when I did it, I said, I gave it this path, and then I put the name as DigitalOcean. So it created a public and private key. So here I am, I'm just logging in. Great. So here's a couple commands that I was trying to run, but importantly, I just wanted to show the one that I was kind of working with before. So here I am at that same instance, and I'm going to run gophish. So gophish is a platform that if you were doing something, say, beyond a like Cyberforce or CCDC, and you were actually doing some kind of pen test engagement, you might actually use something like this, right? We're talking right now about the initial points of compromise. And when we talk about initial points of compromise, one of the common ways to actually have that is to do some kind of phish, right? If you work at an organization, you might have seen this before. So here's a phish campaign that I was trying to set up. gophish is pretty easy with that. And the idea here is I could create usernames so that my manager or my other teammates could get in and see the campaign. So campaign, when we create a campaign, we basically need to create an email template. We need to create a landing page that we want them to go to. We need to create a URL that they can reach. So in this case, that would be my public IP address. I tried to set up a DNS name, but silly me, I didn't think about networking, that it takes a bit of time for those records to actually propagate. And specifically for this, when we're talking about records, we're talking about MX records, right? So when you set up these kinds of tools, oftentimes there will be additional steps that you might read when you're reading about how to set up the tool. And in this case, it was like set up SMTP on your system. I set up the ports and everything like that on the DigitalOcean droplet, but I needed to set it an MX record that would point to maskline.fun, and that did not set up properly. I've sent test emails and all of that. But the idea being here is that all I've really done is I've just spun up the DigitalOcean droplet, and I'm going to go ahead and log out of this and then kill it because that's a very bad password that's on there. But just the kind of general idea here, right? So all I really did was I did some wgets off of GitHub, and I downloaded gophish. I installed it, and I set it up, and I configured it. And then I started setting up some of these different config files that are in here, right? So I've got these examples .config, and and different things like that. And so a lot of these blogs will be talking about like a private lab. So if you're trying to do this like here in a DigitalOcean environment, you need to make sure that you grab the public IP address of your system. And then you need to make sure that you go ahead and config.json, and then you're going to need to make sure that you set up like your listening URL and other things like that. So a lot of these different tools will have some of these config files. They might be JSON for Linux. They might be some other type of config file, and you just need to like start working with it, right? So another one that I was trying was this reverse proxy, this mod Linska. Anyway, I wasn't really able to get these things set up because it took a good amount of time. So another thing that I really wanted to quickly talk about was this idea of okay, so now that you've got some infrastructure, well, what can you do with that? Well, so one of the things that I'm working on for school is a senior project where I'm setting up a Terraform environment into AWS that kicks off from CI/CD pipelines to stand up my some infrastructure to put up a website, right? And so when you do a lot of competitions, oftentimes they may give you a GitHub or a GitLab. And what's really cool about that is that it's very modular. You can start developing things automatically in GitLab. So one of the things that I've done here is I've set up a Git pod, which is based off of the Eclipse Thea engine. It's kind of like a free version of Visual Studio Code, and right here, right? So if I was working with other teammates, I might be able to add them in as different users for different Git pods. So each user has their own environment, so everybody can just start working. And here's some of the Terraform CLI that I've been working on for a GitLab pipeline. And here's some of my Terraform code, right? So what this is doing is when you run Terraform, Terraform is a lot like Ansible. You run different plays and and what you can do is you can actually build Terraform modules. So what I've done is I've created this Terraform module here. And all I did is I went to Google and I Googled how do I set up an AWS static website bucket, right? So that's all I've done. And so I'm trying to extend the functionality of this, but I'm not quite there. So the general idea here is that you will have a set of resources, and I'm just doing a clear, and then I'm running an ls. If you use a semicolon, this is a nice way to chain commands together. This is just going to say run the first command, and then regardless of what happens, run the second one. You can do ampersand, which is the same kind of idea, but this is just, quick and simple. So a couple things that you have to do. You get your Terraform main, and then you got your modules. You'll have to install the modules. I've already done that. And that's, that's something that you can quickly do. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my Terraform apply here. And Terraform is going to read the modules and put it to the Terraform program, and it's going to start spinning things up. So here it is, right? It's telling me that I'm going to put up a lot of different things inside of AWS. I'm going to create some subnets. I'm going to create some load balancers. I'm going to route the traffic to those instances so that they're reachable. And I'm also going to configure it so that they are reachable only behind a NAT gateway. And these are all things that I can define directly within Terraform, right? So if we look in here, right, this is my Terraform main, and a lot of the things that you're seeing on that screen are all things that I defined within Terraform. And I was able to do that because I created this Terraform module that is able to talk to the S3 bucket, right? So there's some base underlying Terraform code that's out there. And this is all, you can think of this as a lot like YAML files. So if you've ever worked with Ansible, it's very language friendly, right? It's not something that takes a whole lot of thinking for you to figure out. You're just telling it like, hey, here's the source of what you're going to use. Here's your regions, and here's your providers. And this is all things called infrastructure as code. And why is that important? Well, part of the other side of you doing security is you're also going to possibly be doing security engineering. And it does not make sense for you to spend all your time sitting there developing and hand building applications. That doesn't work. So by keeping everything as infrastructure as code, I'm able to programmatically define my IT resources, and then I can share that with a team, right? So if somebody finds something online and they're like, hey, we need to add this new feature to this or add something like that, and they're developing it or I'm developing it and it completely breaks everything, well, it's in Git. So all I have to do is roll back to the last commit, rebase it, and now we have working code again, which is a lot easier instead of just thinking about like, okay, what has somebody kept in their head? Do they know how this works? Do they know how to make this work? And that's kind of the idea. Like one of the things that you will see when you start working in the field is that when you're building security tools, you need to be able to build them in such a way that you have repeatable outcomes. And by defining them as infrastructure as code, this takes away from the whole type this command in, click this, edit this file, set this up. No, you don't have to do any of that. And so what's actually happening here is this is talking to AWS, and AWS is setting up some instances here. And as you can see, the instances are slowly being created, and eventually Terraform is going to stop. And then I'm going to show you another thing that we can do, right? So a common technique that you might see even in your red teaming is that you need a way to get some of your binaries to a target that you may not be able to route to. But if they have access to the internet, they might be able to, you might be able to, or they might be able to hit a bucket, right? And that's kind of what we're doing here, right? So I've installed the AWS CLI. I've also installed the AWS CLI here in my Git pod, so I could do potentially the same thing. But again, this is my senior project, so it's not completely done yet. But that's kind of the general idea, right? So we say AWS, we're using the S3 option because we're talking to an S3 bucket. And I want you to copy this modules AWS S3 static website bucket WW. So the contents of that folder, I want you to copy those to the website. And if we go back here and we click on WW, we see that we've got an error and an index. So, and it's just saying Dave's test site, hello world, for the title. So let's go ahead and click it. And it's going to go ahead and copy the information up to the bucket. Important thing to think about when you're working with these things is that you're going to be given keys and other things like that. And if you lose your keys, you're not going to be able to get back into your buckets. You're not going to be able to get back into, you're not going to be able to get back in, right? For DigitalOcean, if I lose that SSH key, I'm done. For AWS, if I lose the keys that I use to set up the AWS CLI, I'm done. I can't get back in. So that's another thing to think about. Yeah, we want to be good hackers, but we also need to be good system administrators. And there we go, right? So there it says hello world. So if I quickly wanted to change this bucket around, I could do modules, modules, AWS, S3, website bucket, WW, and then I'll do index. And then I'll go ahead and say, hi, Candy. Cool. And then I'm going to go ahead and run this copy command again. And all that's really going to do is it's going to, and I'll actually clear my screen so that you can see this a little better. All I'm going to do is I'm going to run this copy command. And so it's going to put that back up in the bucket. So it's just going to change out what's in the website. Cool. And so it's uploaded it. And so if we go ahead and we hit refresh, it says, hi, Candy. right? So imagine this. Imagine if Candy got onto a system and he needed to get a file into the system. I could in Terraform, I could quickly spin up a bucket for him. I could drop a reverse shell or a payload, maybe one of the payloads that Candy was already working with, right? And he just needs to get access to it. And maybe he can route to this bucket. So he could do a wget, he could do a cert util, he could use that fancy PowerShell command that he showed in the previous video and be able to pull this information back, right? So that's kind of what I wanted to show today, was kind of this idea that there are existing tools out there for system administration, and we can also use these in our red team activities, right? And so none of these things that I'm looking at were really too hard to figure out. It's just this DNS part, and I just kind of wanted to show that, right? So that modlishka, that's just a GitHub page that I've been looking at, and then gophish, right? PHIS, that's, and you can see a bunch of Googles. And then, so I also just got that gophish from here, right? So I'm just following along in a tutorial, trying to build these things and set them up. Hopefully by the next go around, I'll actually have some DNS names set up, and we'll be able to use those. And so that's another thing, right? A lot of these tools don't work unless you have SSL certificates or you have a fully qualified, purchased, and registered domain name. So when we're doing this for red team wise, we can use things like dynamic DNS, which is a way for us to set up an ephemeral website name, but we can also just go purchase one, right? So this only cost me like $1 to purchase masculine.fun from Namecheap. So I'm currently trying to get this set up with DigitalOcean, right? So how did I do that? Well, I went into DigitalOcean and I started setting up some records, right? So I had to set up an SOA record, which is a start of authority record. So I just went here and I set at masculine.fun. And then I started setting some of them up. So for that modlishka, which I'll show next time, hopefully, or maybe something else, this needs to get fully propagated, and it's not currently there yet. I didn't think about that it would take like about 48 hours for all the records to fully propagate. And here's that TXT lookup. Yeah, so it's still not there, but we can see that this is actually registered to me. So that's something that I'm currently setting up, right? And so that's okay. I failed to get that part set up today. But that's fine, right? But we also need to think about this, right? When we're using these cloud resources, they can cost us money, and they can cost us a lot of money, especially Amazon, AWS. So I need to tear these things down. Like let's think about that. Let's think about a use case. So Candy's already gotten the tool in there. Cool. So let's go ahead and remove the bucket there. So I need to get my remove command, which is in here. So I'm saying AWS S3 RM, right? So Linux folks, you'll see that command makes sense. Remove the resource located on this S3 bucket. And if we go back into our console, we can see we've got these EC2 instances that we've just set up. And then we've also got some of our other resources in here. So if I go to S3 for my storage, and AWS is a beast of a tool to learn, right? So definitely spend some time checking that out. And everything I'm doing is on the free tier, so you can just play around with this to your heart's content. And definitely do it, and you'll learn a lot. So I need to remove this bucket so that I'm not charged. So let's go ahead and remove it. So I'm saying remove the bucket and remove it recursively. And that's important. So cool, now those resources have been deleted. So let's go ahead and hit refresh. And the management console refreshes and we see the bucket is still there, but the site does not exist. Cool. So now I need to get rid of this infrastructure completely. So I'm going to do Terraform st destroy.
And are you running this from your local machine here, these commands?
Yeah. So that's a great point. So I am running these commands locally from my personal computer, right? So I didn't have to do anything crazy. All I had to do was just install Terraform and install the AWS CLI directly on my host machine. Eventually, the idea here would be, and Terraform destroy, so it sees all the resources and now it's starting to delete it. Eventually, the idea would be that ideally, I would like to have everything in this Git pod. And this Git pod actually just lives as a configuration file inside of this Git lab. So I just added the badge and all I have to do is click the button and then I have all the resources in here. And this is just a Docker container on the Git lab infrastructure. And yeah, so this Terraform does just exist locally on my computer, right? And one of the things that you can always see, like if you ever don't know which terminal you're in, right? You can always say like host name, and I'll say your host name. My host name is Sad Machine. If I'm over here on my DigitalOcean, my host name is this Ubuntu One vPCU GPU, and I'll go back into my DigitalOcean droplets, and that's my droplet, right? So I don't have Terraform in that droplet, but that might be a good idea. Like if I needed to share the droplet or if I needed to share these resources, I would definitely want to be in a situation where I could. So cool. So my bucket's been deleted and my instance was deleted, right? And I didn't exactly show a whole lot of it, but and if I have time, I don't know if I have time. Do I have time, Candy, to spin it back up again?
No.
No, okay.
We're over time.
Cool. So yeah, I was able to spin up some instances and get some load balancers and all of that. So yeah, that's just some idea there of some ways to share red team resources using system administration commands. Hopefully I can expand on this further. All right. Thank you, Candy.
Yeah, this is great because I'm not an infrastructure guy, so I need to learn all this stuff. So to be able to see this is really awesome. All right, thank you.